it would be a good idea to have one single video devoted to the serous membranes. This is probably the hardest for students to grasp, but because the concept is a little odd and the terminology is just so different and odd. So what we have are serous membranes. There are 3 different sets of serous membranes wrapped around particular soft organs of the body, such as the heart. We actually use the heart usually to describe this concept because the heart actually kind of looks like a fist. Now, the way that a serous membrane works is it has an inner part and an outer part. The inner part is going to be wrapped directly around the organ. It's sort of like a fist going into a balloon that is not very highly inflated. It sort of collapses around the fist, and so there's a portion of the balloon that's going to be lining. It's going to be clinging directly to the fist, and then it's all the same balloon. It's all part of the same, but you have another part out here that is external to that. And there's airspace in between them. And that's how it works with a balloon and a fist. Well, it's exactly the same thing with serous well, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's close to the same thing with serous membranes and soft organs of your body. So a really easy way to see this is with the heart. You have a portion of the serous membrane that clings directly to the heart. Now, this would be called the visceral layer, because viscera is a word that means organ. So a visceral layer of the serous membrane would be clinging directly to that organ. In this case, it would be clinging directly to the heart. And then the other part of it is called the parietal part. The part that is kind of like outside of all this would be called the parietal part, and there is the spelling of that. Now, the serous membrane that surrounds the heart is called the pericardium. So there's 2 parts to this. We have the visceral pericardium that clings directly to the heart. And then we have the parietal pericardium that lines the cavity in which the heart sits. And they're both part of the same membrane. And there's not really an airspace between them, but there's like an egg whitey, viscous, syrupy kind of a substance between them called serous fluid. So this is the serous membrane that we usually use to introduce the concept. So visceral means it clings to the organ. Parietal means that it lines the body cavity, and so it's like outside of the organ, there's a little bit of space there. As you can imagine, the primary purpose of a serous membrane is protection and cushioning, cushioning a soft organ from a blow, for example. All right, so when we look at, I think a good place to go with this would be here. So we have our parietal and visceral pericardium, and then we have serous membranes that surround the lungs. We have visceral pleura that cling to the lungs, both left and right. And then we have parietal pleura that line the pleural cavity. And again, it's all one continuous thing like a balloon. The whole purpose is to, the purpose with lungs is actually a little bit more involved. It actually helps with respiration, but we'll get into that in second semester. But, for now, just understand that it's kind of like that extra layer of protection for the lungs. So the serous membranes surrounding the lungs would be pleura, P-L-E-U-R-A. And then in the not all of the organs in the abdominopelvic cavity, but many of the abdominal organs are going to be surrounded by one last serous membrane, which is called the peritoneum. Now, the peritoneum is going to be, some of it is going to be clinging to the organs, and some of it is going to be lining that abdominopelvic cavity. So there is the visceral peritoneum, and there is the parietal peritoneum. And again, not all of the organs here actually get wrapped around. For example, the kidneys do not have any protection at all from serous membranes. It has its own little capsule, but not as much protection as other organs do. All right, so these are the nightmare terms, honestly, visceral and parietal, and then we have the pericardial, pleural, and peritoneal serous membranes.